but it's still not possible.
Recording is on.
Great, recording is on. It's still not possible, but these actually give us the opportunity to have people like Vladan, who are not based in the Netherlands, for this kind of meeting, and it's really great. And so also the next meetings, AI Tech Agoras, will be online for the next 2 months, and there are already appointments that you can see on our website. And I would say let's move to the talk. And let me introduce briefly Vladan. Vladan Joler, or how shall I? Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. He's a researcher and artist based in Serbia, and his work is focused on data investigations, data visualizations, critical design explorations, and they aim at investigating societal implications of technology, if I'm correct. And you may know one of his very famous projects, which is Anatomy of an AI System, developed in collaboration with Kate Crawford from AI Now Institute. But there are also other very interesting projects, and probably we'll see some of them. So you can start when you want.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here today, and so let me start some kind of like maybe longer version of the story. So basically, I think maybe even 10 years from now, I started to organize some kind of big gatherings of internet activists here in Serbia. It was called Share Conference, and it was back in those days in which we believed how internet is a good place and how we should fight for it and stuff like this. And then so it was like some kind of big gathering of activists, hackers, lawyers, this kind of internet freedom people. So but then in one moment we realized that you cannot do a lot with just meeting great people and gatherings and stuff like this, because in moments when something was happening here in Serbia and in the region, we didn't have capacity to react in a way on those like different attacks, threats, and stuff like this. So we started to organize one group. The first name, it was Shared Defense, and so it was like kind of mix of lawyers and cyber forensic guy. Then there were like tech experts, like lots of different interesting people at one place. So we started to deal with those problems of like mostly in Serbia. So we're doing like monitoring of cases of internet attacks, and then slowly we started to do some kind of investigations into like network. First started with like network topologies, because always I wanted to even back in like 2000, early 2000, when I saw like first maps of the internet, I wanted to to try to do the same thing. And in a way, when I coming back, like, I don't know, like 14, 15 years later, I realize now I have like a knowledge and tools to start to explore those like network topologies. And we started to do our first investigation into like, trying to understand how those networks look like, how, for example, like internet in Serbia look like, or what is the life of one internet packet. In a sense, then we were like following these internet packets and trying to build some stories out of it. And so we were like going step by step into deeper into like investigation of what I like to call like this invisible infrastructure. Basically everything that is happening behind the screens. No? So I can maybe start to share some. Okay, just a second. Share. Okay. Are we good?
Yes.
So, for example, this is like those investigations that we were like doing in the beginning. So there's invisible infrastructure, the exciting life of internet packet, and then going deeper into some mapping. Then we're, step by step diving deeper and deeper, like first visualizing trackers, permissions, data flows, and then more and more going into this kind of surveillance architecture or surveillance capitalism, let's say, until we and those investigations end up with creating first of the big maps that I did, and that one was called Facebook Algorithmic Factory. And now I'm going to show you a lot of crazy black maps. So this is the first one, so it's called Inside Facebook Algorithmic Factory. And here I wanted, it was really, the question was how this invisible, imaginary, this abstract factory of Facebook is functioning. So we were trying to map, for example, on one side all the data we are, or all the types of data we are contributing to this platform, and then on the right side we try to map how this platform is basically selling our data. So this is, for example, mapping of this kind of categories that exist within the process of creation of ads. And then the most challenging part of this investigation and map was this middle part of what's going on between the input and the output. And this is how we enter into this field of algorithmic transparency and so on and so on. And in a sense, we tried a lot of different ways how to measure what's going on behind this black box. But at the end, the most useful way to investigate that we found in that moment, so that was I think 2000, I don't remember, maybe 14, 15, when we started to do that. So I found out that there's a collection, or that it's possible to get all the patents that Facebook had. And in a way that we found several thousands of patents, and we started to read some of them in a way in order to create this mosaic. And that is one of the rare visualization, one of the rare maps that exist out there about this kind of invisible algorithmic process. So I was trying to find different patterns that were basically solving the mystery of what's going on between the left side and the right side of this map. And then when I created this drawing, first of all, it's kind of you need to be a bit crazy to do that. And but in the same time, I was really sure that something like this is really necessary. Even if it looks scary, it looks what's going on here and stuff like this, I think. And back then I was really thinking, and I still do, that trying to understand those complex processes that are happening behind, it's really, really important. So if we want to progress in our life, in future, and in whatever, it's really good to know and to try to understand, even if it's possible, even probably it's not possible at all to create the map that will completely explain the process, because those processes, in a way, I was working on this map for 2 years or something like this. But and during these 2 years, this processes behind the black box changed 1 million times. So in a way, this map will never be precise enough that we can say this is a reflection of reality, completely reflection of reality. But in a sense, it's the only map that exists out there. And I think it's really important to try to map the processes that are so influencing our lives on many different ways. And in a sense, this one was over there for some time, and it was mostly used by people who are like dealing with the internet freedom, advocacy, lawyers, and I was going around until in one moment it didn't become some kind of like mainstream thingy, because like BBC wrote like some text about it, and then it became some kind of known piece of like known drawing or map. And in a way, this is the moment when those things transform from some kind of like cartography into something that some people are considering that this is art, or this is design, or this is, I don't know, there was like a lot of different explanation. What is this? Even for me, it was never art, it was never something like, for me, it was just like my internal struggle to understand different types of complexities that exist out there. And then, on one side, I have this kind of curse of being trained as a visual artist. So for me, that somehow combined into what you are seeing. And then, in a way, there was some kind of big change in what I was doing, because I met one friend of mine. It's called, her name is Joanna Moll, and she like infected me with this idea of materiality of internet infrastructure. And then, basically my investigation exploded in many different directions. So what I was explaining to you until now is basically this. Like I was always starting from the position of a user who's here, and then trying to go deeper and deeper as I can into those kind of like things that are happening behind. So, for example, most of investigation, we're starting with an object. So, and in this case, so this is another map that I'm speaking about. It is called Anatomy of an AI. And so it's starting with the object that is called, Amazon Echo. So first thing, it's of course to open the device, and then I was opening the device, trying to understand what's going on inside, and trying to, understand what kind of data is coming in, what kind of data is coming out. But even on this first step on investigation, you see a lot of different layers of untransparency. So, for example, the issues related with hardware we can say it's right to repair, open schematics, diagnostic tools, planned obsolescence, proprietary software, privacy, digital security. So this is some kind of first layer of the problem. And then deeper you go. So the next step, then I'm investigating, like, for example, how this device is connected to the internet, what kind of packets are going through. Then we are doing like internet mapping and infrastructure, trying to understand, for example, in this case, where the packets are going, where, for example, Amazon have their data centers, where they're located, and so on, so on. And then going deeper and deeper behind, trying to understand, like what kind of hardware there is, and then trying to, somehow go into the level of algorithms, neural networks, and so on, trying to understand data behind this. And this is something that I was doing for a long time, let's say like 5-6 years. I was like really, being more and more skilled to go deeper and to investigate deeper and deeper. But then, as I said, like I met Joanna, and I started to think differently in a way, and she gave me one book. The name of the book, it's Geology of Media by Jussi Parikka. And then I was completely like, trying to think about those infrastructure from the completely different angle, so from the angle of long period of time, from the angle of geology. And if you start to think in that direction, the story goes completely different. So in this middle part of the map, we were mostly speaking about like privacy, security, data exploitation, this kind of stuff. But then when you start to look at this kind of infrastructure from like the angle of geology or angle of like deep time, there is a different problems. And then I started basically to draw this map, not from this middle part, but from here, from the Earth and elements that are basically part of those devices, that are part of those like infrastructure that we are seeing. So in a sense, what I did, I kind of, like went back in time when all of those devices that are part of this infrastructure were different kinds of rocks. And then I started from there. And then I wanted basically to tell a story about birth. This is the left part of the map, life and death of one device. And in this case, this is Amazon Echo or device. And then I started to work with Kate Crawford. She is like one of the most, I think, known people in the field of the AI ethics. She's running one institute it's called AI Now as a part of NYU in New York. And then we started to investigate this story, starting from, elements. And then the story goes, there is like, in most of these devices, there's a mobile phone, or servers, computers, and those Amazon Alexa, for example. There is like a 2/3 of periodic system of elements in it. And in a way, even on that level, when you start from elements, you see that the devices that we are using today, they are, like really complex to produce, in a sense that you really need some kind of like really diversity of different elements. And it's not just like, a few hundreds ago, most of the things that we are producing were made like from few different, materials. Now, high tech, it's built of almost like whole periodic system of element, and it's hard to tell a story. It's really complex. So it's starting from many different elements. And in a way, I was also thinking like, if you just follow each of those elements, you will be able to make a book about this journey from, like this kind of one element to the product. And then another thing happened. I needed to have some kind of visual structure, visual element in order to tell a story. So I use these kind of triangles that are basically really present in the work of. So it's classic, this kind of Marxist way of like understanding labor and everything, but in a way it's really present in the work of another author. It's called Christian Fuchs, in which basically I try. So the story goes like this. It's always like this. You need to have a resource and tools. Then you are using some labor, and then this is, as a result, you are getting some product. Then this product is becoming a resource for another. Then you are using another form of labor, and then you're getting a product. So resource, labor, product, resource, labor, product. So I try to tell a story through those triangles, going through different, processes that are happening during the birth of one device. But what is really interesting, it's like when you go deeper into that, you realize that, for example, like Apple have one, in one device, they have like just first layer of their suppliers, it's some kind of 250 companies. And those 250 companies that are supplying these parts of this machine are, like all around the globe. But then those 250 companies have their own 250 suppliers that have their own 250 suppliers. And in a way, for me, I was like, more and more I was investigating, for me, this structure became like really interesting. So I understood basically that in some way those supply chains are some kind of fractal structures in which you can zoom more and more and more and more, and there is never an end. And but what is like really for me another important aspect of this is that when we are seeing like the problems that are appearing on each of those let's say steps, it's completely different than the ones that I was investigating before. So it's not anymore like this kind of security or privacy. It's more like, hard labor, forced labor, child labor, conflict minerals. But in most of the time, there is like a price, and this is like environmental price that no one is paying. So on one side, you have like this kind of like exploitation of human labor and really some kind of diversity of different kinds of relations that exist out there. On the other side, you always have this kind of exploitation of resources, natural resources, and you have always some kind of environmental cost that is really part of the process. So when we are speaking about mines, you need to understand that, for example, like for one little part of one little part of the gram of some material, you need to move, like half of the mountain from place A to place B, and so on, burning and melting, and so there like so many different, and also like the numbers of kilometers. So, for example, when we speak about this, like just from all of those first level suppliers for iPhone, for example, like just I was calculating a number of kilometers, how many kilometers all of those components need to travel to Shenzhen in Foxconn factory, and it's like 2 times to the moon and back, and so it's a massive a planetary scale factory in which like everything is moving around, and the thing is that those costs of environmental costs of those movements of goods are really not calculated into the end price. No, in a sense, this is something that we share between all the people on the earth, but the profit it's not shared among all the people on the earth. So I tried also to calculate like for each of those jobs that I was like able to detect there, like how much people are earning, and then like big part of the process is happening in some kind of China and Philippines, in India, and so on. The really low salaries, but then like cap between the person that is on the bottom, that is basically probably a child working in the mine in Congo, and Jeff Bezos, who is on the top of this pyramid, is it's not even possible to count, but it is in a way like 1 to 7 million or something like this. So someone and all of other people are somewhere in the scale in between. So in a sense, there is like inequality of like standard of living between people in this like one big factory that is going from 1 to 7 million. And then there's a lot of also different things that we can speak about, but maybe I will leave this later for questions or something. But please interrupt me if you have something to ask. In a sense, there is also different forms of labor that are happening here. So we here on the bottom, you have like people working in the mines. Then somewhere here, you have people working in Foxconn doing some kind of algorithmic work, like on those like assembly lines. But you also have some kind of hybrid relations, for example, in Amazon storage systems and those like places where the robots and machines and people are working together. And we managed to I was able, because I was traveling a lot, trying to investigate most of those places. So I went to some of them. So for example, I managed to enter into, together with Kate, in some of those big storage places of Amazon, where you have those kind of robots moving shelves and stuff like this. So you are, if you follow from the beginning to the top, you see different forms of labor, like, and different relations, like. And so this was the birth somehow, and then all of those things are fueling the infrastructure that is like in the middle of this map. And then on the right of the map, you have a process of death, in a sense, like most of those devices are being like thrown away after a few years and then going backwards, basically to the Earth, and again a lot of strange and really dangerous working conditions and stuff like this and stuff like that. And then the main question in that sense, like how fast those cycles are happening, how fast we are seeing this kind of like movements from here to there. And because like this is every time when we, for example, buy a phone or buy we are basically giving a new spin to this cycle. We are basically approving all of those processes. Another interesting point maybe here will be like, if this is the global planetary factory, and it will be interesting, for example, to think what will happen in what's going on now in this circumstances of like a global pandemic, and how those parts of this global factory are being like, how they're surviving this and things like this. And so, yeah, maybe I can make a little pause here and open for some questions, and then I can move to some other things that I want to show.
So everybody who has questions, they're welcome. I have a little question in curiosity. So you were saying that you actually entered into facilities of Amazon, and so did you find resistance for that? Because I imagine, it's not that easy to get in and ask for information and data about these kind of things.
Yeah. Basically, for Amazon, we and I really encourage all of you to do that.
Yeah.
In a sense, there is a way to get in by some kind of official tour, because and people are so once or a few times per month, I think there is like, they allowed, some amount of people to go there and to go on some kind of guided tour. But in a sense, being guided or not, it's like really, it's really intense experience, because like you feel you are inside of some kind of like, inside of a machine. It's like really noisy environment, and those robots, and it's really not safe environment. And you really see some kind of like dystopian future of work, in which like most of the people there, really doing some kind of, repetitive gestures and moves. But in the same time, because like all of this machine and all of this like storage system, it's run mostly algorithmically. So for example, on those shelves, you have like different products that are not related in any logical human way. So for example, it's not one shelf is books, another shelf is, something else. No, everything is mixed up, everything is mixed up, because it's just representation of what people are buying together, or there's some kind of like algorithmic logic. So it's completely alienated from the human understanding. So the people who are working there, there is no human logic in it. So you are just part of some kind of algorithmic process, for example. It's a really crazy place.
Yeah. Cool. And yeah, maybe you are also, I don't know, maybe Luciano has a question. Did I see a hand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, fascinating things. Very interesting what you do there. And I have a question regarding the idea from human knowledge and human behavior to training data. I know that you're on the bottom, the center part, where I could see that you have something like this. Can you share a little bit there? Because is this, do you have some similar ideas related, like to from the geological perspective to the hardware, and from this knowledge to the data training? How do you see this? Is this like is the relation there?
Yeah. So this bottom of the map was basically the most troubling for me, and most like demanding. In a sense, I really spent like months in trying to do those two things, and they're far away from perfect. So what we're trying to explain here, I will speak a bit later about some other thing that I did on the similar topic. But what we try to do here, we try to think about like this process of enclosure. So in a sense, like, in contemporary, we have this idea of like, during this time of like a big industrial revolution in a sense of like this. So the resources was mostly like, like different kinds of metals and ores and land and things like this. And then those, like in that time, there was this kind of process of like enclosure of like resources but and then in a sense, this is like the time when the first of this kind of like big concentration of like power were going on, Rockefellers and in a sense what we have here is kind of similar to that, except the big difference is that the contemporary data-based capitalism can expand into infinite number of different territories, but at the end, most of those territories that they are invading in this search for resources are basically territories of our bodies, territories of our behavior or of our conscious and unconscious, of our cells in our bodies and like different kinds of data that we are able to produce as humans on one side, on other side. So there is this kind of huge rush into quantification of everything that can exist, from stars to the smallest atoms of our body, But on the other side, there is like a products, and this is those two parts. One is like quantification of like human body actions and behavior. Another one is quantification of human-made products. Like whatever we create will be quantified, will be digitalized, and will become a part of this new. It will become a new territory that is going to be basically digitalized, quantified, and then in a way like transformed into some kind of like wealth or whatever. And so in that sense here I try to map basically some fields of like quantification, or fields of like those new territories, and then in some way the process how this is like being transformed into and becoming a part of the process of, for example, here like learning of like algorithms, or like learning machine learning process, and so on. And in a sense, this, I think, like anatomy, this map didn't went far into that. I will show you some other maps that are maybe a bit more on that track, because here we wanted to basically show the map that is kind of like speaking in the same time about exploitation of labor, exploitation of nature, and exploitation of data in a sense. And what we wanted to tell here is that maybe we should not forget about like exploitation of labor and exploitation of nature as a equal part of this mosaic, of this story, because most of the time in like last, I don't know, like few tens of years, we are just mostly speaking about data, and in a sense, like what we wanted to show here, it's we wanted to show, okay, this have like another layers of problems that we want to speak about. I will show you some. Is there any more question in the same related to this map, or there is a?
It's fine.
So after this one, I started to. Sorry.
No, I raised the hand, but it's fine. You were already answering those things, so go ahead.
Okay. So after that, I tried to I worked for like 1 year or maybe even more on something together with Matteo Pasquinelli. And the project was called Noscope. And it's published, I think, like a few months ago. It's kind of still fresh in a sense. And here we wanted to basically this Noscope, it's part of this part of the map, because here we gave some kind of wider anatomy of like an AI system, but then here with Matteo, we tried to go deeper just into this kind of like AI as a system without this kind of supply chains, right? So just what's going on within the process of data learning, for example. And in the beginning, the project was called Limits of AI, because we wanted to understand where those systems are failing, what are the limits of like processes that are happening behind, and we end up with this map. Just a second, need to just a few seconds.
Little course break.
Sorry, working from home. So we end up with creating this map that is basically also following the similar process. So it's starting with let's say like the world, society, and then we have like in the middle we have like a process. First you have a process of capture, then you have source selection, then dataset composition, selection, labeling. Then we have algorithms, feature extraction, pattern extraction. So at the end we are getting a model, and at the end we have some kind of application of the model. But what is, so this is some kind of like basic structure of one machine learning process, let's say. But what we also wanted to understand here, we wanted to understand what kind of labor is there and what type of bias we can map during this process. So for example, on the left side of this map, we try to map some kind of for example, human bias related to all of those kind of ghost work or the work that we don't see when we are thinking about like AI and stuff like this. But on the other side, on the right side of this map, it was like process of like trying to map different kinds of machine bias, because we understood there are like it's a mix between human and machine bias that is complete all the time during the process of creation of like machine learning models. So and then we tried, so this is what's happening on the bottom part of this map. And in the middle part of the map, we also follow the same logic, but here we are going more into this kind of like types of because like in a sense, what we are seeing here, we are seeing an AI as a process of like compression of information, and statistical compression in a sense. So in that sense, we are trying to understand all of those like mathematical, let's say, or statistical processes that are happening, and trying to understand what are the limitations and what are the failures that are coming from each of them. And then at the end, like we try to map different kinds of like what kind of consequences we are dealing with on the top of this when we in a sense like apply those models into the world. So this one, oops, battery. So that was the something that we were like, that I was working on together with Matteo Pasquinelli. So this one is maybe a bit abstract to show like in such a short period, of time, but in a way we can. I can like if you have time, please go and check this one. So it's noscope.ai. Yeah, so that's the.
I think it's really cool, this work. I also love working with visualizing information, not at this level, of course, but so I'm really curious how you see the potential impact of this kind of work, because you said, in your opinion, it's really important to understand what are the hidden processes behind these systems, and I really agree. But do you have an idea, apart from these projects are very impactful because they get acknowledged, they get recognition through awards and museums and these kind of things. But beyond, let's say, sensitizing, do you see a use, some way, like decision makers, policy makers could make use of this kind of work?
Well, I think there is like a lot of different levels of it. So, for example, just in building this one, Matteo and I, we spent like 1 year in thinking about how to, because for example in this field of machine learning and like AI, you don't even have clear terminology or like explanations of like some parts of the process. So some kind of common explanations for this or terminology for that, so every kind of attempt to create a map, it's a challenge and on the first place it's a challenge for us, because it's like you can write academic text, but when you start to draw something and you start to draw a map of something, then a lot of different questions are appearing, and so the process of creation, it's like really important, I think, because like then we are trying to find an answers to some questions that appear during the process of mapping, and but then but not every map, especially this kind of cognitive map. Now we are not speaking about like the first map that I show you. It's more like I don't know, data visualization and these kind of things. But now the more and more it's some kind of cognitive maps that are they're always. We also need to think about that those maps are also really biased in a sense of like like they pretend to be something that is true, but in a sense that can be also questionable, because it's our or my way of interpretation of the world.
True.
So in that sense, like especially Anatomy of an AI and also Facebook one and was used in different fields. So for example, Facebook map was mostly used for this kind of advocacy, like to show how the system is complex or evil. In a sense, it have this kind of like potential to be a tool for scaring people to make some decisions. No? And then on the other side, Anatomy of an AI, it's more like, it finds its way to both into like classrooms where people are using this map to show something, but also it finds its way into museums, into galleries, into like different formats. So I think like there is a huge potential in like and this power of maps, like, in a sense, I believe that the power of map is really big, like in a sense that to help people to navigate, because like what we are facing in the world is like we are facing this kind of like really big complexities and obscurities of like reality, and I think it's important if you want to navigate those spaces, and in a sense it is really useful to have a map. And yeah,
I think we have other questions in mind. I saw Arkady had a question before, but I don't know if you still have that. And then Joanna.
Yeah, I had a question which basically resolved when I looked at the notes. So I went to Noscope AI and I realized that you actually wrote the whole essay about the map. So yeah, I actually found the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll pass the word to Joanna.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you. It's really, really fascinating, the work you do. I have a question about the implications of this kind of tools, not only the implication for ethics or for policy, but also for design. So I was thinking in terms of like ethics, I thought about transparency and how seeing the humans and the environment as part of it positions transparency or explainability of AI in a different place, in a different site also, in relation to humans also. And then questions of like who creates these explanations, who is receiving them, is kind of challenged. And then also the implications for design, because when you see how much humans are implicated in the construction of AI, it kind of moves the way we, or it needs a shift of the way we design AI. We think of AI in design as like co-constituted by humans and the AI. So what thoughts you have on that, or like?
No, that's one of these like we tend to this kind of idea and believe into automation and a way of in autonomy of technology outside of human field. It's completely like some kind of like myth and some kind of like idea that is really present, but in a way it's really far from reality, because like if you deconstruct like in Noscope or in Anatomy of an AI, all of those systems, you will see that they're full of people doing different things. And it's just not just full of people, but full of people being treated differently, like people labeling the armies of these mechanical Turkers, labeling images, or people who are being part of the image, being on image, on one picture, and that are being taken from those companies and becoming part of like a data set. So there's like whole variety of different roles that human beings have in the process of creation, both of the hardware and models and software or whatever. So this kind of myth of automatization is completely myth. There is no such a thing of like completely independent out of human existence intelligence or whatever, but each of those steps, each of those involvements, human involvements, brings with itself like some form of human bias, no? Sorry. So, and then we can also speak about that, like that how probably there is no way that something that is completely not biased is ever be able to be produced, because there are like lots of different questions of like, like who is choosing the data set, from which, how this data set is being sampled, how, like who is testing the results, who is fine-tuning the learning algorithms in a sense of like, tuning hyperparameters or something like this, so it's like really, really hard to this idea of unbiased models is completely crazy in a sense. And the also on the other side, like there are some kind of like within the processes of like compression of data and all of those like statistical processes that are happening, most of them, all of them, have some kind of, like problems in a sense. Like, so for example, interpolation and extrapolation, model fitting, curve fitting, dimensionality reduction. Like those are all different kinds of like process of like reduction and compression of information, that in a way, every time you do that, you have some kind of loss, and then what do you have as a result of this kind of loss? And most of the time you have like this kind of like anomalies are being thrown out of the game. And then if we think on some kind of more ethical level, who are those anomalies? Maybe I'm the anomaly, like maybe, so there are so many different layers of like the problem. And so when we were thinking about this kind of limits of an AI, there are so many different dimensions of those limits and so many different problems that are coming with.
There is another question by Evgeny, I think.
Yes, yes, Vladan, thank you very much. Really fascinating work, really incredible visualizations. I'm curious about your thoughts. So you mentioned that you mentioned that if we want to navigate the space, it's useful to have a map. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts? So you showed maps of existing systems. What are your thoughts about trying to construct maps of the kind of world that we want to see? And then can we then use such an approach to help us understand how do we get from the kind of systems we have today to the kind of systems we want to have? How do we make that bridge? What are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
No, this is the something that appears as a possible way out of this, but for me personally, I don't feel I don't feel competent in the sense of like projecting. I feel more comfortable in the field of like trying to understand first how the system look like, or how those complexities look like, and this is somehow where my capacity is ending. This is what I don't feel. For example, I like my kids went to school today, and I'm still not sure is that a good or bad decision. So I'm really bad in projecting what's good or what's bad. I find like my role in this will be, this process is to try to understand how things look like in this moment, and then I hope that someone will take the responsibility of framing something, the next step, how to go out of there. So it's somehow I don't feel capable of like doing that for the moment, but I think it's really important if someone should.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing.
And I can show you something else as well. So this one is like, so this one is a bit different than all of the maps before. I show you it's called New Extractivism, and I'm not too sure you will be able to see a lot, but I think I had a lot of fun doing this in last, I don't know, 1 year or intensively during like the last 6 or 9 months. So it's basically the map of something that I call like a new extractivism. So in a way, it's the same topic as previous maps, but this one it's basically some kind of assemblage of different ideas, of different concepts, of different things that other people did. So mostly like philosophers or like media theorists or different artists. And in a way, what we are doing here, this map, we are following. We are following the like some person who is falling down into the black hole, and in a way this is starting with this idea of one artist. She proposed that, like, to try to think about the internet and those spaces about some kind of like that you can apply this kind of idea of gravity, how those like big companies are basically curving the space and time. And in a way I started with this, and then we have this little guy who is trying to escape from this like a black hole. And in a way, like when this person passed the point of no return, he's falling into some kind of cave. So this cave, it's basically a Plato's cave and also Panopticon cave, in which each of us are like spending our lives in. Then I try to understand the architecture of this cave. So on the one side of the cave, you have a projection of some kind of personalized content. You have the interface, you have some kind of chains, and then you have shadows. And then these shadows is being captured by different capture agents, and then tra la 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 la. And then the story is following this, invisible abstract machine into the processes of like on one side, like I'm following this idea of individuals and Deleuze and Foucault and French school, how like extraction of this information, and then you have some kind of like creation of individuals. On the other side, extraction of information from content, and then all of these together. And then on the bottom, you have this one is a bit crazy, but and you have like different forms of extraction, how basically different forms of labor.
It's cool. So it's called manual. So you imagine it as a also sort of guide for people who wants to engage in a similar work.
It's okay. What you're saying now, it's manual that is basically used to reading of this map. So there is a map, and then you have a manual to read, because I think this is maybe a bit too crazy in the sense of how to read it. And then basically what I'm trying to do there, I'm trying to go step by step and to explain each of those.
Yes. We have a new question in the chat. And Derek, would you like to make it by voice, or shall I read it?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just very briefly, because it's the end of the hour, but I loved seeing the new scope. There were a lot of ideas that seemed very new to me, and overall the work is really fantastic. But I loved its esoteric references, but I also loved how it addressed some of the magical thinking that takes place in, I guess, the politics of AI. The politics of new extractivism seem a little bit more apparent, but I'm curious what some of the intentions were and outcomes were of NewScope.
Well, as I said, the intention was to work and to explain the process in some kind of, maybe we didn't manage, because also the Matteo's text, it's really intense and it's intense, but the idea was to try to create some kind of basic dictionary for understanding of the process and of creation of like models and AI and stuff like this. So we wanted to make a drawing that will be on one side, accepted and understandable for tech expert people who are working with that, and to them we wanted to share this idea of like, bias, human involvement in all of this, and we wanted in a way to try to break this like myth about automatization, or like autonomy of this thing, this kind of myth of like how this is some kind of magical intelligence or whatever, you know. So that was the idea. But on other sides, for like more, you know, like this kind of non-tech audience or like non-tech experts, we wanted to make something that maybe will help them to understand also the technical part, like what is the basic anatomy of this system. So it's supposed to be somewhere in between those two worlds, and at the end, I'm not so sure that we managed to create something that is readable on both sides, but that was some kind of intention, to try to deconstruct and to try to understand and communicate the limits of those systems.
It reminds me a little bit of Richard Feynman's discussion of science and beauty. You know, this idea that understanding the science of a rose would somehow make it less beautiful. And it's not quite in terms of the beauty, but in terms of the magic of it. I felt like by deconstructing it and taking away the magic of it, it actually revealed the magic of it. And yeah, for that reason, I thought that this project and the other was just great art, great science, great political gesture. So just kudos. It's really great to see.
Yeah, it is somewhere there. It's always what I like to do. It's like I like to be on those like intersections between different worlds, and in the sense of like there is not once like so many times in my life I was like, you need to pay a price for that, in the sense of like, the people from science will say, this is not science, this is art. People from art will say, this is not art, this is science. So you are always somewhere in between. But I think I'm always somewhere in between. But I think this is like a really interesting place to be, and to try to somehow use all the possible tools, languages, and weapons we have in order to demystify and, in a sense, like understand those like complexities. And this is what I was like trying to do in like all of those maps. It's like, because I'm most of the time I'm working together with either like sometimes like scientists, sometimes like media theory, sometimes philosophers, sometimes it depends. And I think that's the only way, in a sense of like when we are speaking about the like drawing or like making pictures of black boxes. I think what we can do is to try to look at them from different angles, as much angles as we can, and then maybe we will create some kind of chance to understand what are the shapes of those things. So for me, the angles are tech, cyber forensics, legal analysis, art, philosophy. Those are different angles that I'm trying to see the object from.
Great. Thank you very much, Vladan. I think we have to wrap up because I know some of people in the talk have other meetings. It was really amazing to see. And thank you again very much. And again, other comments in the chat. Great.
Okay, thank you.
And I hope you enjoyed the questions.
Yeah, sure. It was really a pleasure to be with you guys today.
Thanks, it was our pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.